People are being attacked by unseen forces. Normally, rotting meat is associated with a demonic entity. The fact that children are being attacked has gone too far. G'day ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first official episode of Enter the Paranormal. In this video, we're not just celebrating the first episode of Enter the Paranormal, we are also celebrating Halloween. And if you ask me, the best thing for Halloween is a good ghost story, and oh boy do I have a good one for you. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite haunted locations, not just in Australia, but in the entire world. This is one of my favourite haunted locations of all time. On the outside, this building looks like a beautiful old building, and it is, but on the inside, it has a very dark history. But let's not waste a lot of time, let's get into a good ghost story. This is the story of the Old York Hospital. York is the oldest inland town in Western Australia. It is roughly 1 hour and 20 minutes east of Perth. In 1829, due to the increasing population, new land would have to be discovered for the growing of crops to provide food. The town of York sits on land that once belonged to the Balladong Noongar indigenous people. The first English explorers arrived on the land and noticed its resemblance to the English town Yorkshire. Therefore, the land became known as York. So, York. I have family in York, my cousin and his kids and his wife, so I go to York a couple of times a year to pay a visit to him. Now, every time I go to York, I've started a tradition where I take a photo in front of the Old York Hospital. I don't know why, that's the closest I can get to it. It is privately owned now, so I can't get inside. I would love to, but I don't really want to get arrested for trespassing. With the natural increase of population, the town began to take shape. Homes were built, and so were government buildings, including one very particular building, a hospital. The Old York Hospital was constructed in 1896 and opened that same year. The hospital replaced an earlier hospital, which was an establishment built only for men. The hospital was specifically designed to accommodate the growing number of ill prospectors from the goldfields that would seek medical attention. The harsh conditions in the goldfields caused many serious illnesses and even deaths. In the very first year of the hospital's opening, 65 patients were admitted. When necessary, surgery would be carried out right on the kitchen table. The hospital included a morgue, a laundry room, the nurses' quarters, and a maternity block. But the dark energy from the former hospital still remains today. A former matron who worked at the hospital in the 1920s said, "There was always something terrifying about the upstairs rooms. The hospital staff refused to go up there alone, and even when the ward was full of patients, the nurses always made their rounds in pairs." The hospital is a large grey building surrounded by trees, but strangely, wildlife seems to avoid the place completely. So I have gone and seen the old hospital about 7 or 8 times when I've been to York, and I honestly don't think that I have ever seen any wildlife around the place. Trying to remember, I don't think I've seen any birds in the trees around the place, so this idea that wildlife is avoiding the structure, I wouldn't be surprised. The hospital officially closed in 1963, but in 1976 it was sold to the National Trust. The National Trust converted the former hospital into a youth hostel. In 1980, members of a children's athletics club and their adult supervisors stayed for a week in the former hospital. Late on the first night of their stay, sounds of moaning started to come from inside the walls. The source was never found, but repeated several nights in a row. The next morning, during breakfast, a large china jug levitated and smashed to the floor in front of 2 women. Right after breakfast, 2 of the youngest children were attacked by an unseen presence in the hallway. One of the girls started screaming, "Hold me, hold me, I can't sit down, stop them, stop them." She was thrown against a glass panelled door at the end of the hallway. The impact was so hard it shattered the thick glass and gashing her arm to the bone when she tried to protect her head with her hand. She was rushed to the hospital and stitched back together to stop the bleeding. But the very next day, a boy went into shock when he witnessed a human figure materialise out of thin air with its hand off the doorknob of the now broken door. The fact that children are being attacked has gone too far. For me, that would be the point where I would get out of that place. People are being attacked by unseen forces. How are they not trying to get out of this building as fast as they could? They had to travel home, yes, but they could have called like a bus or something. So the intensity of the haunting began to escalate, usually in the afternoon. One of the supervisors was kicked in the back by an invisible force. Doors would slam shut onto people, injuring them as they walked through doorways. Invisible needles were felt to be injecting themselves into an adult's flesh, and the stench of rotting meat filled the building. Also, the idea of rotting meat filling the building, normally rotting meat is associated with a demonic entity. Was the Old York Hospital haunted by a demonic entity? Probably not, but it's definitely likely. By the end of the third day, the adults and the children were sleeping in one room just to protect themselves. After that, the presence seemed to focus in the downstairs area near the stairway in a room known as the dining room. The dining room had been bolted shut when the group first arrived, but somehow, on the third day, it had unlocked itself. The caretaker of the building tried to downplay the group's experiences. He was a little hesitant, but he also admitted that other groups who had stayed in the former hospital had reported similar experiences. He agreed to provide a dog to help guide the group, but the dog refused to enter the building. So it's said that dogs can see ghosts and entities, so this point, 100% believable for me. But the fact that the dog would not enter the building would immediately trigger the alarm in my head. One other person described an experience they had at the Old York Hospital. He said, "When I was a kid, my grandfather had a house in York. I'd go and stay with him sometimes. Me and one of the local kids got into the building when it was closed. We went through the back to an open area where there were stairways. I remember feeling like we were being watched, not just by one person, but by many. As we only got a few steps up, my friend screamed like a little girl and jumped and landed on me. He picked himself up and was panicking. He said, 'Let's go, let's go.' He said that he felt a hand gently touching the side of his head, like someone was stroking him." The former maternity ward is supposedly one of the most haunted places at the former hospital. People have said that they have heard women crying, babies crying, and even the voice of a woman asking for her baby. One of my absolute worst fears is hearing a baby cry in the middle of the night. This idea that people heard babies crying and women moaning terrifies me so much. The dark history of the Old York Hospital remains today, but what really happened on the inside? The former hospital is now privately owned and can't be entered, but even looking from the outside, it is terrifying. So is the Old York Hospital haunted? Possibly. I personally believe that it 100% is. I think with everything that happened on the inside of this place before the haunting actually began, I think that would have created a lot of dark energy. So as I said, the former hospital is privately owned now. I don't know if people are living in it. There's a house like beside it, so maybe they're living in the house beside it. I don't know what the situation is. But if they are living in it, or even if they're not and they still own it and they go into the place every now and then, surely you don't experience nothing. You have all these claims from people who have visited the place and stayed in the place that there is something going on there. So I read somewhere that someone actually approached the owners and talked to them about the Old York Hospital and asked them if they actually experienced anything for themselves. And apparently the current owners were very uncooperative. Apparently they didn't really answer the question. Apparently they didn't really want to answer the question. That to me is fear. They're scared of something. I can remember the first time my dad took me to show me the Old York Hospital. It's at the end of the road, so you drive onto it and it kind of overtowers you and it overlooks you. And I was absolutely terrified. And back then as a kid I didn't really have an interest in the paranormal, but it still scared me a lot. Today, it still scares me. I'm still terrified of this place, but I love the ghostly story behind it. I love the history behind it. And the look of it as well. It's a beautiful old building. And I'd love to have the opportunity to go on the inside and conduct a proper investigation. As I said, this is one of my favourite haunted locations of all time. This is a place that I can't actually get into and investigate though. So my mind will always have that question of, is this really haunted? But there we go, that is my Halloween ghost story for you all. If you did enjoy it, make sure you give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe, because I'm going to be having a lot more discussions about ghost stories on this channel. If there's any ghost stories you'd like to hear me discuss, let me know in the comments down below. I'm also going to be releasing a Q&A next week on this channel and talking a little bit about my experiences and telling you guys what to expect on this channel. But I hope you did enjoy the first episode, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy Halloween, everyone.